The date palm has always been an emblem of the United Arab Emirates. In the past, when the food resources were still rare here, dates were a vital source of nutrition for the Bedouin tribes, who traveled the desert between the dry summer months and the winter season. Dates satisfied their hunger and provided much-needed sugar.
For Abdallah's family, as for many large Bedouin tribes, Liwa Oasis has always been a refuge in the middle of the desert. It had shade, a few fruit trees, and most importantly, water just below the surface. A string of natural shelters radically altered by man over several decades.
The palms on this plot were planted by my grandfather. This is the parcel where it all began just over 40 years ago. He planted all these palms with his own hands. Then other people arrived and started planting too. And that's how the palm grove spread. They mainly worked the plantations in winter because it was very strenuous work, and the summer heat was oppressive. So they would return to the coast for the pearl harvest. They worked as pearl divers. With the money they earned, they were able to develop their plantations and provide for their families. I know this landscape, these palm groves, like the back of my hand, and yet they still fill me with wonder. They tell me the story of my family. Everyone has moved to Abu Dhabi now, but our roots are here. My family made a living growing vegetables and dates, and that is how it grew.
3 generations to create, bit by bit, this 70-kilometre-long mosaic of trees and sand. Situated in the southeast of the Arabian Peninsula, the palm groves of Liwa extend in an arc 100 kilometres from the city of Abu Dhabi, the capital of the United Arab Emirates. The oasis extracts groundwater beneath the world's largest sand sea. A desert called the Rub al-Khali, the empty quarter, even though it has always accommodated a few inhabitants, permanent residents, or passing travellers. The oil boom of the 1970s had a profound effect on traditional society and made the Emirate of Abu Dhabi rich, but the region remains one of the most arid in the world. For farmers, engineers, and scientists alike, it is more important than ever to preserve blue gold in the land of black gold.
This, the nest I told you about, it's not far from here.
The nest?
Yeah.
I was thinking about it. It could be, I think, 3 things. It could either be an eagle, or it could be a desert raven. It's a big crow.
No.
Not one of them?
It was huge. It was huge.
It's probably golden eagle then. If it's that big, it has to be an eagle.
Does it breed here?
They are known to breed in this area, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Robert Gubiani and Omar Al-Kabi are zoologists. On behalf of Abu Dhabi's Environment Agency, they are developing an inventory of the animal species that roam the desert around the oasis.
the empty quarter known to us here, or it consists mainly of mega dune habitat and sabkha, and is very sparse in vegetation. So a lot of these dunes are very, very old, and they only move a few meters every year at the top, but they kind of layer up. It's almost like you can see the wind shaping it, each dune. And although they're hard to drive up, they're wonderful for animal tracks because they come up so clearly, especially in the morning.
To study the often timid creatures, Robert and Omar stick to the sabkhas. These small plains rimmed with vegetation, sometimes found at the foot of dunes, between the desert and the palm groves of Liwa. Here, a few hardy plants sink their roots. Clouds and morning mist deposit moisture, and life emerges discreetly from the bare sand. This is why Robert and Omar hide their camera traps here. They check their haul of photos regularly, and sometimes find a few surprises too.
Anything interesting?
There's fox, red fox, gazelle, oryx.
Ooh,
Oryx in there?
nice.
What's that?
You reckon it's a ruffle?
Nah, it's red. It's too tall. Fluffy fox.
Check the time.
2 o'clock in the afternoon.
It's strange, isn't it?
Must be hungry. It's funny he's out during the day. Right. The reason we put it here is because it's kind of a dip between all the sand dunes. So it's got lots of vegetation. There's food in the sense of birds and rodents and gerbils and jerds. So the predators are going to come down here looking for food. So it's kind of like we use it as an investigation tool to assess habitat quality and what's coming here. If there's no foxes, that means there's no gerbils. If there's no gerbils, it means the habitat isn't very good quality.
At first glance, the sabkha margins appear to be sparse savanna, like that of his native Australia. But Robert Gubiani knows that the Arabian red foxes, wildcats, and sand foxes feast here when the sun goes down. For the mammals, each shrub and thicket is a well-stocked larder on the edge of the empty quarter. Because beyond the fringes of the oasis, another world unfurls, almost another planet. A planet where the temperature can soar to 60 degrees Celsius on summer days, and where it takes expert hands to unearth the odd form of life.
This is a reptile. It's commonly known as a sandfish. Of the two species in the UAE, this one's more colourful. It has the orange and the yellow. And he's very slippery, like an eel almost. But this species is quite common in the Liwa region. As you can see, it's got a very long nose and completely smooth scales, smoother than that of a snake. It's thin, it's elongated, its feet have got forks on them so it can dig through the sand quicker. So they'll be after the ants on the sand dunes, or any moth larvae, or even moths that are on the common plants here. And they'll generally only be feeding at the hottest time of the day when they get the most heat and they can be the most active. At night time, they'll burrow down to avoid being hunted. So you see them from afar, but you generally never see them this close. So we're very fortunate today.
Running and diving into sand, the sandfish has developed a way to enjoy the desert sun and escape predators. But not everyone possesses its remarkable adaptability. Until the mid-20th century, people carefully avoided the Rub al-Khali. Only a few Bedouin tribes travel through Liwa and its pockets of life, which owe their existence to groundwater.
Nomadic tribes that are always on the move. They will usually be going either from oasis to oasis or trying to reach destinations by which they could either over summer or over winter settle as the weather was getting extreme.
An influential advisor at the Ministry for the Environment, Sheikh Majid bin Sultan Al Qassini, always speaks movingly of this not-so-distant past, when his people's survival depended to a great extent on hunting and gathering.
I remember asking my grandmother, who's still alive, who was saying and telling me about what they used to eat. And it was very simple at that time because it was all they could have. So they would, in the morning, have some dates. And typical of this region, that you used to have locust swarms. And in the season of the locusts, they would set out camps in the desert to be able to capture them, and these are roasted and eaten. And there they would either have, in the oasis or in the location that they were, certain plants and certain animals that they could hunt. And that nomadic lifestyle was very much about living in harmony with the environment. Without it, you wouldn't survive.
Adapted to the constraints of aridity, the nomadic way of life did without agriculture for millennia. No need to put down roots in the desert when you have to move on anyway.
The camel really was the backbone of nomadism. It was both vehicle and provider. You used to be able to move your whole settlement, your whole tribe, with a caravan of camels. And for those that weren't moving so far, they would use camels to make sure they also got camel milk. That was very sort of vital to the nutrients you were getting, as well as deal with the harsh weather, survive on very limited water resources. So it was really built into the ecosystem.
Today, though, the camels look glum. In the 1970s, their nomadic masters became sedentary. Villages and hamlets sprung up on the former encampments, but the majority of the population gradually moved to the cities on the coast. Just 10% of Emiratis now inhabit the oases in the country's interior. Although they no longer live with their herds, the Bedouin remain deeply attached to their former travelling companions. A purely sentimental attachment? Not exactly. In the United Arab Emirates, a race camel costs as much as a luxury car. This probably explains the intense excitement every weekend at the country's camel racetracks. It's the Wild West in the land of Lawrence of Arabia. Everyone comes to cheer on their champ and get ready for the contest held every year. Perhaps in memory of the long transhumance of yesteryear. In Liwa, however, no one exhausts their camels at racetracks. At Mrs. Al-Mansouri's place, they even enjoy a well-earned retirement. For younger generations, these big, cuddly 1.5-ton animals are a reminder of a life they have never known. But Mrs. Al-Mansouri has experienced the transformation of Bedouin society and the oasis firsthand.
I was born into a rural family. My father and my grandfather before him started growing dates. I take care of the plantation now for my own enjoyment. I like the idea of being independent, of being able to come here with my children. I do as I please here. It's important for me to keep this place and share it with my children.
On the family's land, Mrs. Al-Mansouri looks after her palm grove the traditional way. As males and females grow on two different trees, she transfers the pollen by hand to get the best possible fruit in a few months' time.
I grow all sorts of dates: Kala, Lulu, Goman, Daba, Gnazi, Ziz. There are Sati too, which originated in Saudi Arabia. I also grow tomatoes, bell peppers, eggplant, cilantro, parsley, dill, cabbage, and cauliflower. All the vegetables you find at the market, I grow here.
When she planted her first vegetables in the 1970s, Mrs. Al-Mansouri was among the pioneers. One by one, she and all those who resisted the lure of the big city created the vast plantations we see today. But how could Liwa Oasis, a transit point, suddenly support such a concentration of trees and agriculture? Where did they find the water needed to create this crescent of greenery in the middle of the desert? On the surface, the Rub al Khali is an erg, a desert of fine sand with no permanent watercourses. The area receives just 40 millimeters of rainfall per year, and to develop it, the water beneath its dunes had to be harnessed. Buried for millennia, this natural underground water reservoir is what specialists call an aquifer. About 30,000 years ago, the climate of the Arabian Peninsula was much wetter than it is today. Rainwater seeped through the soft subsoil until it reached the bedrock, the hard, solid area of rock at a depth of 100 meters. It stagnated and absorbed mineral salts. Each successive rainfall deposited a new, younger and fresher lens of water above it. This is the water that the Bedouin managed to draw for their herds. And most importantly, it is this water that modern techniques brought to the surface at the height of the oil boom. One man led almost single-handedly the greatest development the area has known in its thousands of years of history. This man was Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, the father of the Emirati nation and the founder of the modern state.
Throughout the country, schemes like this are underway. Propagated in nurseries, the young trees are then transplanted to the desert. As they grow, they bring back life to what was once no more than barren sand.
Following independence in 1971, Liwa became the epicenter of a Green New Deal. This resulted in the creation of the large estates, which ushered in a new era of prosperity for the Emirates, and in which their owners still take pride today.
The late Sheikh Zayed realized that if you have agriculture, you have civilization. He understood that with agriculture, we could be stronger and more self-reliant. The opportunity to be able to grow your own food meant that you were able to command your own destiny. And he took it one step further and started to be able to bring fresh water to the agricultural practices in the region. And with that, in what was considered a very arid and very hostile territory, you began to see a flourishing of agricultural practice to green the desert, because understanding of access to water, the understanding of how to manage our environment and work with the environment to be able to grow crops became possible.
Water for all. The country's rarest and most precious resource suddenly began to flow. Thanks to oil money, wells, channels and irrigation networks sprang up everywhere, even in the heart of the desert, creating a few somewhat surreal situations in the process. For this is not a lake. Although it looks completely natural, it is actually artificial. The result, in fact, of substantial leakage. It now attracts birds from all over the world. Ornithologist Shahid Bashir Khan has even come from Indian Kashmir to study this extravagance.
It has huge numbers of common pochards, mallards, grey herons, great cormorants, flamingos. It's not just an assemblage of species, it's the whole system. So you'll also see smaller birds, you will see raptors, birds that hunt on them. And it's very interesting if you see 80% of the bird species that have been recorded in UAE are migratory. So it's a large chunk of species that are moving once to south and again around this time of the year to the north.
In the past, a few Bedouin travelled across the desert on camels. Today, 90% of the Emirates population comes from abroad, and other travellers who wing their way around the world stop off here as well.
When we look at the migratory pathways around the globe, UAE is in the West Asian, East African pathway. And most of these birds, which includes a lot of water birds that you will usually see along our shores, the coastline, so they go through the land. Because all of these green areas, they will have insects. So the smaller birds, they will stop here. They will tend to eat those insects, refuel. These are their refueling stations. They will stay for some time and then they will move south. And what is also important is some of the water birds, they breed around that inland wetland. Water is the most important thing in the desert. And once you have water somewhere, it kind of acts like a magnet for all of these species. And if it is a safe environment, no trespassing, no hunting, so that is the place where you will see most of the birds. Plus these birds, they keep on exploring. Once they know that we have a site, so they will keep on coming back.
Pumping the groundwater for decades may have been favourable for agriculture and delighted small birds, but unfortunately the old aquifer was gradually depleted as a result. Agronomist Riyad Al-Nassan has observed this. He left his native Syria 30 years ago to take care of the Gulf's rapidly expanding palm groves.
Here you can see traces of insect attacks, holes burrowed by the red palm weevil. It was a lot of work, but fortunately, the trees are better now. My palm trees are healthy, insect-free.
Withered trees, harmful insects and lower yields. Over the past 30 years, Riyadh has witnessed a constant decline in the quality of Liwa's groundwater.
Agriculture is completely different in Syria. We have Aleppo pistachios, olive trees, almond trees, citrus fruits. I discovered palm trees when I came to the Emirates, and I have acquired a lot of knowledge about the different varieties, how to sow them, and the reproduction techniques of specific varieties. As God is my witness, I do my best to take care of them, but there is still a lot to be done to solve the water problem. The date palm, like other trees that live a long time, needs considerable amounts of water. It depends on the type of soil, and it varies according to the variety. We have water. There are 2 wells. One pumps water for 4 to 5 hours a day, the other for 2 hours. So there is water, but the problem is it's too saline. As a result, the palm grove's productivity is slow. God willing, things will improve one day. "30 years ago, fresh water could be found a few meters below ground level. Today, the wells are 80 meters deep on average and only bring up saline water from the bottom of the aquifer. The result is scorched vegetation and soil made sterile by a thick salt crust. There are several ways to remove the salt or to try to control it. At the moment, we're trying out a method to neutralize the sodium, but we're still at the testing phase. This system uses electrical energy to treat the water. By acting on the electrons, it reduces the water's salinity and makes it suitable for irrigation. It doesn't remove all of the salt, but by modifying the physical properties electronically, the water becomes purer. We're currently testing the process, and we'll need an entire season. It's difficult to come to a judgment before we have the final results.
Engineers helping farmers. In the Emirate of Abu Dhabi, Riyadh is not the only one worried about the sector's future.
Assalamu alaikum, Mr. Roman. How are you? How's everything? Good? Good, excellent. How was your progress in this area?
Doing great. We are ahead of schedule.
The Environment Agency has become aware of the problem too, and Dr. Bayan Al-Tamna has made a special trip from Jordan to help Rommel and his response team on the ground.
23 sites. So let's start here on this side. Did you choose the sampling site or not yet?
Yes, we did, but we have to check around and then see if this is all.
Okay, then let's check the area. So this one is still wet.
For several months now, Rommel and his team have been taking soil samples all over the oasis.
Okay, then let's check this one here.
The goal is to create an accurate map of the extent of salinity in Liwa's agricultural soils.
Excellent.
This morning, Rommel and Bayen have come to make sure the samples are being taken correctly, with the thoroughness necessary to enrich the database.
First, I think, yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
It's good one.
Okay, good, great. So bring your sampling equipment and let's start.
At the rear of the SUV, everyone works in silence. Because the soil augurs and core samplers are gradually revealing how the water salinity is affecting the fertility of the soil. The salt present in the water accumulates on the surface and dries the soil.
Wallahi ma baraf. Make sure you are collecting the soil sample from the exact soil depth.
So, because of this, you see that?
So we need to homogenize here the sample a little bit. And here, this is the first layer. Good. Good. So here we have the soil. Yeah, good. Still from 25. Okay. Okay, good. تمام.
As you can see, we're collecting samples. Now we're going to measure the salinity. We'll measure the pH, the acidity, and alkalinity. We're interested in understanding the soil salinization process. It's part of our job to end this problem, which represents one of the biggest challenges facing Abu Dhabi's agricultural sector. In fact, soil salinization is a global problem. The world is losing some 2,000 hectares of fertile soil a day due to salinization. We have just begun a pilot project. We're using a technique that has never been used before in the Emirates, hyperspectral imaging. With hyperspectral imaging, we can assess soil quality with drone sensors. Thanks to these drones, we'll cut costs, use fewer people, and save time too. It will make our work more efficient.
More than new technology, the Environment Agency is counting on the involvement of local people to help change practices. And the results obtained by the team are interesting more and more landowners.
Everything's fine. Excellent. Excuse me, Mr. Rommel. We've just finished sampling this zone.
Good.
These are today's results. As you can see, salinity levels are high here.
Yes, it's obvious.
It broadly reflects the quality of irrigation water present here. It affects agriculture. You irrigate, but the plants can't draw water. Obviously, we can't change the water, but we can take measures and learn how to better manage the palm grove in order to improve things or reduce the impact of salinity on the trees.
For many observers, the agricultural model of the 1970s is showing its limitations. Groundwater irrigation may have resulted in unprecedented growth, but it has also emptied the old aquifer. Should this form of farming be abandoned, causing the last remaining farmers to leave the oasis? Perhaps not. This experimental farm, for instance, is trying out solutions for arid and overexploited environments.
The agriculture sector uses the most water in Liwa Oasis. This is why legislation is being introduced to regulate the use of groundwater resources, as well as modern techniques to improve water use efficiency.
To reduce irrigation, hydraulic engineer Mohammed Dawood encourages farmers to adopt new, more economical and efficient methods. Greenhouse farming minimizes sun exposure and reduces crop evapotranspiration.
With 1 cubic metre of water per square metre, you can usually produce 7 to 8 kilos of vegetables. Thanks to these modern techniques, with just 1 cubic metre, we produce 30 to 40 kilos of vegetables per square metre. Another very interesting thing about greenhouse farming is that we can limit the amount of fertiliser added to plants. It eliminates the need for large-scale use of chemical products that can seep into the ground. In some greenhouses, there isn't even any soil. The use of drip irrigation and greenhouses must be developed in the future because open-air plantations are more costly, use more water and produce less. This type of farming is more economically and socially viable.
The fact is, there is an urgent need to reduce water consumption. In all, the United Arab Emirates consumes 800 litres of water per capita per day, compared to a world average of 200. And yet its water resources are among the lowest in the world. This is why the country has turned to another source of supply: seawater desalination. At great cost, plants on the coast produce enough drinking water for the city of Abu Dhabi and its 1 million residents. And yet the opulent Emirati capital, built on petrodollars, proudly displays its symbols of modernity. Forgetting it grew too fast between its salt lagoons and desert interior. Until the end of the 2010s, desalinated water barely met Abu Dhabi's needs, and the city only had 3 days' supply. Quite unexpectedly, it is in Liwa that it created a solution as big as its problem. In the heart of the Rub al Khali, 1,000 miles from any human habitation, a handful of well-informed visitors know there is an encampment like no other. From the air, only strange geometric shapes advertise its presence. The remains of a mysterious civilization, a secret fortress, or movie set. If the facility is guarded, it's because it's a stronghold. 26 million cubic meters of desalinated water have been injected into the old depleted aquifer.
The noise you can hear is the water running through the underground pipes to recharge the aquifer. The water then flows by gravity into the ground, where it is stored in huge tanks.
It seemed like a crazy idea, but Mohammed Dawood came all the way from Egypt to oversee this mammoth project. It took 3 years and $500 million to build the strategic water reserve that Abu Dhabi sorely needed.
We monitor the water stored in the aquifer by means of a series of wells located around each tank. The wells are at several levels, which means we can check the stored water at 3 different depths. This reserve is considered strategic because it will only be used in case of drought or other emergencies. There are artificial aquifer recharge projects in California and elsewhere in the United States. But this is the biggest project of its kind in the world. It is the world's largest desalinated water reserve.
Few countries could afford to follow its example, but by recharging the Liwa aquifer, the super-rich oil emirate can now provide drinking water for up to 90 days in case of an emergency, instead of a mere 3 days. If you redo your underground space at great expense, why not change the exterior decoration too while you're at it? Some people are already hard at work gardening. They are trying to save the oasis's endemic flora and restore its damaged ecosystem.
This plant is called kansur. It is considered an endangered species here in Liwa. The plant environment is part of our national heritage and the identity of the United Arab Emirates. However, our environment and our biodiversity are now threatened by population growth, urban sprawl, as well as by desertification and the depletion of water resources.
A member of one of Liwa's oldest tribes, Maita Al-Mansouri runs her nursery like a miniature oasis. In her hands, each endemic species finds a cocoon here where it can thrive and bloom.
This nursery contains different plant species, some of which are very well known, like the rush, and others that are rarer and endangered at the local level, such as the dwarf palm. Our nursery is devoted to growing local plant species, which the Environment Agency and its partners then use for their different projects. We also replant species and conduct scientific research here.
Like all the Emirates botanists, Maita is eagerly awaiting the forthcoming opening of the first research institute devoted to desert flora. From 2021, it will be able to produce 1 million seedlings a year. Gaff, saxaul, and wild palms will be raised in enclosures, then reintroduced into their natural habitat. Or perhaps into one of the new artificial paradises that are springing up on the dunes. At Qasr Al Sarab, the Mirage Palace, this iconic landscape has become the setting for one of the world's most beautiful hotels. Nestled in the dunes, water babbles in the fountains and flows along channels into the many pools. Luxury, quiet and delight at every level to welcome modern-day nomads and weekend visitors.
Qasr Al Sarab is the most Instagrammable hotel in the world. So you can find it on all social media, on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere, yeah.
Everywhere. I don't have a problem.
The guests can feel the history, how was this history evolved? The arms, the accessories, you know, especially with the falcon. Yeah, the falcon was a necessary in Bedouin history.
The Qasr Al Sarab is a palace straight out of Arabian Nights, but in the wings, it also carries on a few very real traditions. Since the hotel opened in 2009, Walid has cared for its falcons. A bird of prey revered in his native Pakistan, an old companion too of the tribes of the Rub al-Khali.
There are many species of falcons. The most widespread are the peregrine and the Siberian gyre falcon. Common kestrels do very well here too. It's a species that can stand the heat. When his eyes are covered, he stays still. Otherwise, he becomes very agitated. We put this falconry hood on him so we can train him properly. There, those cries mean he's hungry.
Every day at sunrise, Walid and Mohammed come and train their birds here. These falcons only fly nowadays to delight our eyes. But their long, shrill cries echo the great hunts of the past. As if a bird of prey soaring over the desert could momentarily suspend time.
Here in the Middle East, especially in the UAE, the falcon is part of our identity because it was, one, a very important companion, two, one of the most successful predators, and when trained, three, was really a key to survival. With a falcon, you can catch very large bird prey, which you couldn't by horse or otherwise, if you were lucky, sneak up on. So there was a very important relationship between us as a people and the falcon. This bond is very close, and even today, people that own falcons are very passionate and very close to their birds.
Between tradition and modernity, the Emiratis are trying in Liwa more than anywhere else in the country to keep alive the deep bond between the Bedouin and the desert environment. And yet, there where silence once reigned supreme, the atmosphere has changed significantly. Jeeps and SUVs descend upon Liwa every weekend, their engines revving. Tal Marib, the world's tallest dune, towering over 350 meters, is now a favorite spot for dune bashers who hurtle up and down its 50-degree slip face. As others glide on skis down snowy slopes. For thrill-seeking city dwellers, the desert has become a giant sand pit. The bellow of camels has given way to the hum of engines here. Much to the delight of some, and to the regret of others. Every weekend, in memory of his grandfather, Abdallah leaves the bustling city and goes on a pilgrimage to Liwa.
For me, the desert is the most beautiful thing ever. The landscape is calming. It represents many good times spent with family and friends. But Liwa is also my ancestors. Legends, poems in the middle of the night. It's the place where I feel best. It is part of me, my life, my memories. Liwa is our history and our civilization, a place where each of us can reflect on our past and understand how the Emirates has developed, from the first plantations and tents to the great city that Abu Dhabi is today. Liwa is a historic place, and that is something that the Emiratis will never forget.
Nostalgia lingers in the night air. The end of a world fading into history. Twilight of an oasis overtaken by modern times. And after all, why not? What if Liwa's future now lay in the memories it stirs? Less than 50 years ago, Abu Dhabi was little more than a wild and hostile desert. Today, it is one of the richest countries in the world, but its people have forgotten nothing of what their elders taught them. Actors and witnesses of a changing world, they know better than anyone what living in an extreme environment means.